Jeff. It's always good to see you. One of the things that I've always respected a great deal about you is I think your affinity for and seriousness that you put into development of a personal and professional brand as a sales professional. And I think more and more this is becoming really important for salespeople in this day and age. In fact, I was actually been listening to this audiobook, The Psychology of Winning in the 21st Century by Dennis Waitley. And he talks about how we're always free agents. You know, a job is something that you do to get an allowance to pay your bills, but a career is, where we really live and embody our strengths and superpowers, which is what a brand's all about. What are your thoughts? How have you intentionally built a brand for yourself, and what impact has it had on your life and career?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carson. And the feeling's mutual. You're kind of, in my opinion, the best at this. So I'm just trying to learn from you. But I would say that I could talk about my story and I could talk about advice that I would give to others. I'll actually start with advice that I would give to others. Something I've noticed in kind of our little, ecosystem, in the social ecosystem, is that there are a lot of folks who are actually not necessarily incredibly experienced who have gained a huge following. And while I have noticed that others are critical of this, I actually think it's great. And I think it's great for the individuals who have succeeded at that. And the lesson there is that everyone has a unique experience. And a lot of times our own lives don't feel interesting to us because we live it every day. But we don't realize that it's very interesting to someone else, right? Like, because they don't live our lives every day. So what we do is very interesting for them. And we all have our own unique set of circumstances, experience that are pretty interesting. And what I would recommend to others is to really lean into your niche. Even if you're a lesser experienced, let's say you're an SDR, you know a lot about what it's like to be in the trenches doing SDR stuff. And if you are very consistent in sharing content and networking with people who have that common pain or that struggle, there are a lot of folks out there who will really appreciate hearing from you, right? And so that's the number one thing, is to not doubt yourself, and to just know that you have an experience that to somebody else would actually be quite valuable to hear about. So that's the first step. For myself, the journey was I went to this event called Surf and Sales in Costa Rica 3 or 4 years ago. It's run by Richard Harris and Scott Leese, who are two pretty well-known sales consultants. And one of the takeaways I got was like, I'm going to try to build a personal brand. And what I did was I started posting on LinkedIn, let's say 3 days a week. And I just leaned into this idea of authenticity, something that I felt I would just speak from the heart. And eventually I started posting every single day. And I didn't really have any specific goal with this. I just wanted to engage with my network and post regularly. And that was the first step, is just posting regularly. And eventually what this led to is actually writing a book about authenticity. And what that led to was interviews and bylines, and podcasts and webinars and building a website. And one thing led to another. And I'm not famous by any means. I'm really not famous, but it definitely gave me a good stepping stone, I guess you could say. My current role was actually from a consulting role originally that I got from, quite frankly, just from being noticed on LinkedIn. And so I'm grateful for that, right? And so I think the first step, and I know it sounds trite to a lot of people, but it really is to just put your foot out there. And I've been surprised because a lot of times, even if I don't get a ton of engagement on stuff that I put out there, I hear from people all the time, random people will say, "Hey, I've been following what you're posting. I really like what you're doing." I was talking to a friend from college I haven't seen in years, a couple of weeks ago, and he's been keeping up with me on LinkedIn, right? That's just really cool to hear. That's actually what I appreciate the most, is when I hear people like that are kind of like watching from a distance. It's something that I think is really cool. So uh, the advice is, don't consider yourself too small for this, right? No matter what you're doing, your experience is valuable. And the second advice is just do it. Not to be like Nike, but really, if you just start doing it, you will gain traction. You'll start to figure out what works and what gets people excited. I met you because of all this stuff, and doing these videos. I think it's really cool. So that's what I've done. In a way, I've kind of lacked intentionality around it, which is counterintuitive. But I'm not doing it. I don't like posting because I'm trying to get like 1,000 likes or I'm monetizing it in some way because I'm not. It's really about wanting to put out content that's relevant for others and hoping that I can get something similar in return. So I'd love to hear from you about it. You've been kind of rated as one of the top social sellers on LinkedIn. You've built a great personal brand through your books. Tell me about your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I love the topic, and I want to start off by saying a couple of things. One, it's it's interesting because, when you think about a brand as a salesperson, the stuff that you and I do, the stuff that brand builders do, anybody can do. You hit on some really important thoughts here. Like, we all have strengths, we all have experience. I owe so much of what I have and the opportunities that I've gotten to my brand. And I know, and I say this a lot, you can't connect the dots forward. There's no way of predicting where things are going to go. And, the best thing to do is just like you articulated, Jeff, is just to start doing it and seeing where it goes. Um, I've made a lot of posts, blog, video, all that jazz. Not every one of them gets lit up or gets a ton of attention, but what happens is you create an online reputation. You become a known entity. And that's the value that it brings. I look back on my career and I got laid off several years ago. I used the time off to look very diligently for a next job, but I also wrote a book. And because of that book actually being on my resume, that's what ultimately, after a year of looking for something comparable to what I was doing, I was noticed. That book made my resume stand out. So I got the interview. I got in the room. I was one of 30 people to get an interview for this role. And that's all you need sometimes is just to get in the room. The brand can be a calling card to get in the room. I've landed 16 deals for over $300 million that never would have existed if I didn't use LinkedIn and social selling to create opportunities. And so when people started seeing that, they would ask me, well, can you show me what you've done? And I started training on a small level. Then it became bigger. Then it became bigger. Then it became global. Now I do global sales training for one of the biggest companies in the world and meet and connect with people globally. And what's fascinating about that is I started out in a time where there was no personal brand other than, just your reputation around town. How you were known in the circles that you were selling into and that reputation and within your own company. Now we have these mediums that are out there. You can blog, you can create video, create content, and be conversational, be your authentic self, which is what you kept saying. And I love that so much. And I think what a lot of people have a trepidation around is they don't want to come off as cocky or arrogant. They don't want to be braggadocious. They don't feel comfortable making a post because they don't know how it's going to be received. And I think it's important to point out that you and I know speaking for myself, I don't want to speak for you, but I've certainly gone through all those emotions too. In making post, how will this be received? Is this going to resonate? Well, I didn't get much interaction with this post, so whoa, man, maybe people aren't responding and receiving this well. Maybe I should hold off. But I think the key element is the consistency piece, being authentic, being your true self, sharing the experiences that you're having, knowing your audience. I get to connect with a lot of executives in different business groups because of the industry verticals that I've supported, but I've also got a lot of sellers and sales leaders that I work with, that I connect with, that I mentor, and that I am mentored by. And so knowing your audience, knowing your niche, like you said, understanding what's the unique value that I can bring to these folks. And at this point in my career, I've really realized that's exactly what it is. It's the experience that I have. It's all of these battle scars and wounds from years of prospecting and deal negotiation and helping sellers today see around corners as a result of the mistakes that I made 5, 10 years ago. Things that I realized in my career, maybe the hard way, that somebody else can learn from. And what's fascinating is now I've got a kid who has her first job. And I think about that, and it's like I think about all the things that I want her to know. And by putting this online, maybe she'll watch. I don't know, because she's certainly sometimes I don't know if she's listening when we're going to take her to work or whatever the case may be. So I digress. I think the key element is all sellers are a brand, whether you embrace that or not. I encourage you to embrace it. I encourage you to think about the things that you're passionate about. How can you infuse your passions into making a difference for the other people that you can touch? How can you use all these mediums that are at your disposal to create a body of work, but also to meaningfully engage your potential audience? I remember years ago, my publisher of my first book, they were like, go out, get a Twitter, get a, LinkedIn, get a Facebook, all this stuff. And I went out on Twitter, started following people that were following sales authors and sales leaders and speakers, and just did that consistently. And I've wound up with over 300,000 social followers as a result of doing things like that, engaging people meaningfully, creating content, having a conversation. And it isn't all one-sided either. Part of your reputation and your brand is also how you engage with others. I'm on a show right now called Social Selling 2.0. And we talk a lot about commenting, commenting on other people's posts. Part of your brand, especially as a seller, is how you're engaging with what matters to other people. And if you've got a target prospect or a customer that's posting really insightful stuff, that matters to them. And the way you show up in their comments, at signing, calling them out, talking about, what they've posted and maybe your perspective in a more provocative way than saying, hey, great post. Those types of things matter. Those are deposits. I've gotten great customer executive meetings as a result of just making comments on their posts. And when the time was right, I got the meeting. They knew who I was. I was a known entity, and that is the power of a brand. I look back on my career, I got noticed for that job that 10, 11, 12 years ago now because of my first book. And I made it a relationship there that led me to my next role. And I made a relationship there that ultimately was the person that recruited me here. I never would have been here if it hadn't been for my brand. And your brand will always continue to evolve. That's the beauty. It's just like life. It is always a work in progress, working on a masterpiece. So I encourage you all to think about the value that your brand can have. Are you living it today? And how can you use it in a way to create more meaningful relationships and be your true self and let your true self shine?
Good stuff. Thanks, Carson.
Jeff, this was a good one. I can tell we're both very passionate about this. And so
Yes,
great topic. And thank you. Always good to see you, my friend.
you too.
We'll see you next time.